The Drum Candy podcast is brought to you by Drum Factory Direct.
Welcome into episode 11 of the Drum Candy podcast. This is your host, Mike Dawson. I'm coming to you from Drum Factory Direct in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This week, I sit down with the great Matt Chamberlain, my personal favorite drummer on earth, and I know a lot of my friends and peers' favorite drummer as well. And he's apparently the favorite drummer for a lot of bands and artists out there. His track record is pretty ridiculous. It would take me all day to list it off, but if you just go back to the beginning, the first record that I remember is Ghost of a Dog with Edie Brickell and the New Bohemians. Then you've got Wallflowers and Fiona Apple, and tons of stuff with Tori Amos, and then on to most recently, he's on Bob Dylan's latest record. I mean, it's an insane, prolific career. At the same time, he has his own projects, so check out his solo records under his own name. Also go back and check out his old band Critters Buggin', which I believe is one of the first kind of hybrid electronica, jazz, funk fusion groups. It's really, really cool stuff. He just most recently put out a record in collaboration with Stone Gossard of Pearl Jam. That's called Painted Shield. He's got a new EP out under his own name. It's a experiment with modular synths and acoustic drums. That's called The Foundry. The dude is constantly putting out great stuff. So let's just get to it. Here's Matt Chamberlain. All right, well, let's dive in, man. So I've got 20 questions here. I don't think we're going to get to all of them, but we'll kind of see what happens.
Okay.
This is a podcast all about gear, so we're going to get there eventually. But I always open the episode with asking, how have you been spending the past year to remain creative? And then I looked at all music and realized, well, you've made as many records in the past year as you have in previous years. So I imagine not a whole lot has changed for you. Is it pretty much the same?
It's been miraculous having my studio.
Yeah.
It saved me. I mean, I was joking around with some friends when the pandemic started. I was like, I've been practicing for the pandemic for years. I've been preparing for this moment of being in my studio by myself. So, luckily I have my space that I've been working out of. And, when the pandemic hit, obviously a lot of people couldn't tour, so they were just making records. So, a lot of times it would just be people sending me tracks, like Pro Tool sessions, and I would just whip it up. Sometimes we do it like this, like with Zoom, where I have like my iPad in front of my drum kit, and we do there's that plugin called Audio Movers. You know that one?
I do.
So it would be like a real time session. And actually, it felt like a real session because most of the time, as a drummer, you're put in a room away from everybody with, like you're talking on the talkback and you're like, where are you people? Can you hear me? So it's like exactly the same. I was joking around about that. Not a lot has changed and things have continued to be the same. I mean, things are opening up and I've had people over here now, friends that are vaccinated and we've been working. I think a lot of people have realized they can work differently now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, what happens now if you get offered a tour? Are you going to take it, or is it changing your perspective on what you want to do?
I like touring.
Yeah.
I mean, it has to be. For me, everybody has their requirements for going on tour. I just got to feel like I'm playing some music. I don't think it would be really hard for me to do a tour where the music was like a show where you did the same thing every night. And that would be really challenging. I mean, I can't play the same thing every night, even if I tried. I have drummer amnesia. I can't remember, like, what was that fill going into that section? Oh, so it wouldn't work. I'd get fired anyways. So, but it has to be the kind of thing where it was musical and with people I liked, and it just have to make sense. But it is nice to have the option to just record or tour instead of just having to tour all the time.
It kind of got, unfortunately, the pandemic kind of put the Bob Dylan situation on the, like, we kind of forgot about it for a second, but you toured with him for a bit, right? A month or so?
At the end of 2019, we did like 3 months.
3 months?
Almost 3 months, yeah.
Was that a different set every night?
It wasn't too drastically different.
Okay.
There were some things we change out, and then just some things that he would just change on the gig while we were playing it. So that was kind of interesting. That was more of a he's Bob Dylan, so it's like I was just curious like how he operates, and his way of doing music is so, it makes sense to me now, because if you think about how he grew up and his era, it was storytelling, folk music, and jazz, like beatniks and improvisation. So he loves it when you react in the moment. He doesn't want you to play the same thing every night, because he doesn't. He's like, when he plays piano, it's like Sun Ra or Cecil Taylor or something. It's like some nights you're just going, whoa, what's going on over there? Damn, he's taking it out. So
was the making of the record the same way? Like, just go for different options and one of them will make the record?
Yeah. Literally making up the songs right before you record them. And then listen, like we'd listen back to it and he'd go, I don't know, let's try a different way of doing this. I don't know, what do you think? Why don't you try a different beat? Like, let's do a different chord progression. Let's change this. It was just so, it's like a different way of doing music than most people do it nowadays.
Yeah.
It's just very in the moment. And, obviously if you listen to, if you're a Bob Dylan person and have listened to all the recordings he's put out throughout his life, there's like so many different versions of every classic song, so depending on when you record the song, it could be a shuffle, or it could be a halftime groove, or it could be this legato no drum thing. It's all for, obviously for him, he's more of a poet than he is like an accomplished musician, you know what I mean? So he's not like a shredding guitar player or anything like that. He's more of like a storyteller. So I think the music for him is just a backdrop to tell a story. So it could be anything really. And it's like a soundtrack to his,
So when you do a session like that versus a session where the song is written and you're putting the final drums on it, what's the difference for you approach wise, or you approach them all the same way?
Oh no, like there's certain people, like for instance, Tori Amos, who I've worked with since like 97, she'll send me music. We did this Christmas record, and she's all working on stuff. And so with her, she'll just tell me the story of the song. She'll send me like a piano and vocal to a click track and just say, go for it, just do what you're feeling. So, it could be layered percussion with electronic drums, or a simple drum kit groove. It could be, I can get as creative as I want with her because she loves that. And it worked for her music. But for Dylan, he is performance oriented. So he wants to get performances with people, everybody together. I could never do that with him. He would be like, what the hell? What are you overdubbing? What? So a whole different mindset. And like, for instance, on the last Dylan record, he wanted it to be us set up around each other in a circle with no headphones on. And so he put his vocal mic right in front of my drum kit. And so as a drummer, you have to realize that your drums are going to be in the vocal mic. Like the vocal mic's going to be the drum mic, basically. So I really, I had to adjust what instruments I was playing. Everything had to be very muted and soft, and, couldn't really dig in too hard because I would destroy his vocal sound. And it was an education in how the fuck did people make records back in the day, because like you listen to like Sun Records recordings where it's like, you know, I don't know if you've ever seen the Sun Records studio, but it's like a small little room. And, you know, you've seen the videos of Elvis and all these people recording in there. And it's like, he's standing in front of the drummer with a mic, and the drummer's behind him. There's an upright bass player, and he's just wailing back there. But the vocals sound beautiful and like present, and there's no drums bleeding in. I mean, it's just like, how did they do that?
I mean, I would think you throw a blanket over the drums. That's about the only way I could think.
No, but it was all live. And it's like, you know, there's a lot of records from those eras where you just wonder, how did they accomplish that? Like, you know, the Rudy Van Gelder recordings are another thing. Like, how, I mean, I'm sure you've been in situations where you've been in a studio playing acoustic jazz or something like that with that instrumentation, and you have an acoustic piano, upright bass, everybody's playing acoustically, and you're playing drums, and you're like, shit, I can't hear you guys because I'm playing my instrument. It's, you know, it's just a loud instrument. So I was just thinking, like, Elton John, like, just going off, and like, he didn't have headphones on. How did he even hear like what was going on? You know, like, and then to be able to record, then to be able to record it and like not have the drums destroy the piano mic sound, you know, and the sax, and I mean, all those kind of recordings are a mystery to me. But back to your question, Dylan is different, totally different. Most people in, you know, of my age or younger that want to do records are into production and sounds, and you know, the sounds are important, and your parts, and being almost like a sound designer in a way with your.
So did you hear the playback and realize you were playing too loud, or you just knew right away, I've got to use smaller sticks or drier cymbals? I mean,
with Dylan?
Yeah, with Dylan. Was it right away, like, this isn't going to work, I've got to do something?
Oh yeah, different? Immediately I was just like, well, okay. I just had like a crash cymbal that I used as my ride and my crash cymbal.
Okay.
And some broken ass hi-hats that were really dark, and then some have you seen, you know how people get those goat heads with the hair on them still?
Yep.
So I had, like, those were my drums because they're really soft sounding and you can dig into them and they don't get too loud. So that was the kick and floor tom. And then the rack tom was sometimes another snare drum, or I just wouldn't have a rack tom. It was, you know, a lot of his songs just didn't require a lot of drum stuff. You know, it was like, just keep a kick snare hat thing going, or hit a crash cymbal or not hit a crash cymbal. I mean, hitting a crash cymbal is a big event when you have a vocal mic right there. So I kind of defaulted to super minimalist. I just didn't want to fuck up his vocals, you know. It'd be horrible to be like, you know, oh yeah, the record was all right, except the drummer fucked up Dylan's vocal sound. Yeah. I don't want to be that guy. I'd rather just be like, just mute me or something. Like, just take me out. He's fine by himself. He doesn't need me back there.
So on the flip side with Tori Amos, I almost find that even more overwhelming, because you could literally do anything. Like, do you get an immediate inspiration and chase it? Or, I mean, how do you go from her click track vocal piano to what you give back the next day or whatever?
It's a lot of times I'll come up with two totally different versions of the song. Like, there's the one, you know, I do the version that, you know, I'll just chart out the song. You know, as I'm listening to the song, I'll think, okay, this would be cool if I had, you know, with her, I've done like 10 records with her. So I've done full gamut of trying, like, okay, here's an acoustic piano. Most of the time you think you got to play a drum kit that's very of that world, like, you know, almost like a little bebop kit or something, or, you know, something very nice sounding. Like, that's very acoustic and contained. But with her, I've gone as far as just using like John Bonham drum sounds against her piano, or just using things that you wouldn't think would work with an acoustic piano. And, in a lot of the way she writes, she does a lot of arpeggiated patterns that really don't have like a defined rhythmic groove. So you could do anything you want. Like her style is like that. It gets into these like rolling arpeggios, and you're like, well, my rhythmic thing will be the vocals to latch onto for a lot of that stuff. And and sometimes I'll think, well, maybe I won't react to anything. Maybe I'll just play a beat, like make it more beat oriented, or maybe I'll change it up and have 2 different drum kits, or maybe I'll have 2 drum kits at the same time, or maybe it'll just be all percussion with electronic drums being the backbeat in the chorus, or maybe it'll be, I'll just try all these different combinations of things, and she'll react to them one way or another. She usually goes for like the performance oriented, my first impression. Because I'll get into like a science project kind of mindset after I do that. I'll be like, wow, I can have contact mics on my snare drum and run through this amp, and then have the delay, and then just to, because you can with her music. She's just it's like experimental pop music, so it can take it, and the way she's open to that, it can really push in whatever direction she wants. So I don't have a set way of working with her, but it's definitely more open-ended, and it lets me just sit here and think like, well, I don't really have to play a drum kit per se. I mean, I can have like my Native American drum as my kick drum, and run my snare drum through my Echoplex, and have that be like the 8th note pulse instead of playing hi-hat, or use that kind of stuff, that kind of mindset.
Is that quick? Is it a quick process for you to get to an idea, or is this like an all-day adventure?
It's like, within like 3 or 4 hours kind of thing. I mean, after that, I can't concentrate that intensely, especially if I'm doing everything. Like now, I'm engineering everything. And like, if I want to go run out to my room and like do a concert bass drum overdub, I got to get my iPad with Avid controlling the Pro Tools session, and hit the drum and check the levels and run back in here. And, it's like the whole thing. So it's not like going boom and having an engineer get the sound. So after a while, I mean, it keeps you in shape running back and forth.
Need an assistant in there.
Well, I wish. I'm my own assistant. I talk to myself a lot.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, you're right. You're ready for the pandemic.
I do love it. I love engineering. I've always had a studio since I was like 22 years old. I've always had something to record on, so I've always been a fan of engineering. So I just love it. I could easily just engineer shit if I played drums on it.
All right,
that's my requirement. I have to play drums.
Let's talk about your solo stuff, because you snuck a solo record out, or an EP out this year, Foundry, which I just realized it came out. At least that's what iTunes says, in May. And I'm kind of in that world myself, trying to write my own stuff. So I'm asking as many people as I can, how do you get there? How do you get to the end of a track? Like the first one, what's it called? Sorry, I don't know the title. What's the
Pan Scan?
Yeah. Like, where did that start? What was the inspiration for that? Was it a drum groove? Was it a keyboard part? How did it begin?
That whole EP was me trying. I mean, I've always been interested in synths and modular synthesizers, and over the past, like 15 years, I've just slowly collected modular synth modules. Like, there's a format called Eurorack. And so modular synths are, I don't know if you know much about them.
Not much. I've seen them. I don't know how they work.
It's basically just the elements of a keyboard. Like, I don't know if you can see this moog back here, but it's like the elements. Like, you get your oscillators, your filters, your envelope, but they're all separate modules. And so in order to go from one, if you take an oscillator, which is a sound, you patch it into the filter, and then you can filter it. And then you patch it into your envelope to create the attack or decay and all that. But the thing with modulars is that every single knob on there is controlled by control voltage, which means you can have a signal from, like, there's certain modules that just modulate, that send control voltage waveforms, and these waveforms can control the knobs. So the waveform itself is actually turning the knob. You can just like create all these crazy like soundscapes or bass lines. Like I got a little sequencer for my rig and just started recording improvs on it, and then chopping them up into forms and then putting drums on. And that's how I made those things. So like the idea, my initial idea was I want to do modular synthesizers, like analog modular synths and acoustic drums. Like that was the only requirement I had. And then once I had a form, I'd put drums on it, and then I would go, well, maybe I need a little bit of, I'd play a little guitar and like other keyboards. So I just would add little overdubs and just try to see if I could do it all myself, and then just mix it myself. And then you just upload it to TuneCore
or Bandcamp.
Yeah, it's pretty simple nowadays. I mean,
How
I
do
know
you know when a track is done, though? That's where I'm at. Like, I feel like I don't know when it's done.
I don't know. You just feel like it's done. I don't know.
Yeah.
Listen to it and you go, I like that. Like, you don't hear anything else. Like, you listen to it and you're like, well, this section sounds good. This section sounds good. Great, it's done.
Yeah.
I mean, if you listen to it and you're going, well, I think I need like something in here, and then you try to come up with something, yeah, it's pretty simple. I mean,
I like your trick of like at the end of a 4 or 8 bar phrase, you might just do 1 bar of some other thing that comes in. That's like a cool little trick I've noticed you do that I would never think of. Like a tabla thing will come in and then it goes away.
Oh,
it's like
cool.
Yeah, it's like the fill, quote unquote, is like another thing, another sound that kind of pokes in, which I think is really cool.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to do it, and just trying to think like well, drummers are musicians, but trying to think of think of your music as you're the composer and the arranger, and drums are just one part of it. You're arranging this piece of music, unless of course it's like drum solo music, but be ruthless. Don't love your drums more than you love music. That's what I think. If the drums are getting in the way, if you feel like it's just like, all right, maybe I should tell that drummer to chill out. Like treat your drums like it's some dude in the room, and you're like, come on, man.
Man, so what are you listening to and from the studio these days? I know you're a pretty rabid consumer of interesting and unusual music.
I love music. I'm a big fan of music. I keep changing it up every day. Like, what did I listen to this morning? I'll just make playlists in Spotify. Actually, I just learned about this record. I'm always looking for as many Tony Williams recordings as I can. And I love his 80s era because it's just so bizarre. He's like playing these gigantic drums, and he's like, it's like this rock attitude, but all these jazz guys are hiring him to play on it. And he's just like, he's just like, it's so incredible. I wish more people would do that. But there's a Don Pullen record. Don Pullen, the keyboardist.
Yeah.
With Gary Peacock and Tony Williams, and it's wacko. Wow. It's great.
Check that one out. What's the name of the record? Do you know?
New Beginnings. This is it right here. See?
Oh yeah, man, that is 80s. Holy smokes!
Yeah.
I've found like a Cedar Walton, Ron Carter, Tony Williams trio record that is just so bad. I mean, so bad.
Not good. Oh,
not good.
Well, those guys don't have to prove anything.
I know. That's what I love about it. Like, they put it out. Like, this record is terrible, and they put it out.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm every day I try to like, I'll either remember something that I used to listen to a lot and listen to it. Like the other day, I was like, I used to listen to Zappa all the time. Like when I was in high school, I loved Zappa. I love Chad Wackerman era Zappa. I just love like Ship Arriving Too Late to Save a Drowning Witch, that era. I just love it. I love Chad Wackerman during that, like, cause that was when I was like 14, 15 years old and just discovering other music besides what was on the radio. I had friends that were like, hey, check out this Alan Holdsworth record. I was like, what? That's crazy. What is going on? And so I like to revisit stuff that like inspired me when I first started, that made me want to like get deep into practicing. A lot of times I haven't listened to that shit in like 15, 20 years. Like all the early King Crimson, or I mean, not the early, but like the 80s King Crimson. Love that. Lately what else have I been listening to? Like, I love Tool. I love Danny Carey. I think he's just so, the main thing about that band is I don't understand how that singer creates his vocal shit around that stuff. It just blows my mind that he can sing.
It's like riffs, but he writes beautiful melodies over top of it.
And I just love sounds too. Like I just love the fact that it's so, Danny's sound is so, it's like this clean, everything's very clean. Like the cymbals are very glassy and everything. It's just so extreme. And, I never do that myself, but I always try to think of like, how can I incorporate some of that, to like a Tori Amos record or something, who knows? Like just yesterday I was like, thinking, oh, there was this band called Animals as Leaders that a friend of mine was telling me about. And I was like, well, I want to listen to some of that. And that shit is crazy. It is insane. I don't even understand. Like that kind of music, I'll listen to it and just go, what's the entry point of getting into that? Because it's insane. I mean, like you would have to like, first of all, as the drummer, what's his name? Matt
Gartzka. Yeah.
He's incredible. So like what, I would just love to talk to him and like go, well, how did you, like, what's going on? like what? I'm like Mr. like grooving around. He's like, it's fucking incredible. It's like, I had that experience like about 7 or 8 years ago when I was out filling in for Soundgarden. We played some of these heavy metal festivals in Europe.
Oh, wow.
Like Hellfest in Switzerland or wherever that's at. And every band was like that with those kind of drummers where it's like, I'm just on the side of the stage just going, this is insane. Like it has nothing to do with the kind of drumming that I grew up learning, but it's incredible. And it has its own beautiful, weird groove and like vocabulary. And like some of the guys had 2 ride cymbals and like, it's, a lot of other kick drum shit. And like, but I was like, man, this is like a foreign language. Dudes dressed up like orcs, with like, so it's just incredible. I love that stuff. So I like to listen to metal stuff like there's High on Fire, that band, that metal band. Love that shit. I mean, that's kind of like Motorhead with a little more riffs involved, But I love everything. I love ambient electronic music. There's this artist named Hiro Kone.
Okay.
Hirokone. She has a record called A Fossil Begins to Bray. And it's all modular synth based music. It's all just electronic music. But it's not like, it's like really creative, just, I don't even know what you'd call it. It's nice to listen to.
Yeah.
Music, that's the other thing, is listening to music that doesn't have drums in it is always kind of refreshing. Like a big drummer, just kind of like get some different ideas, because a lot of people that do their own music have really unique ways of creating rhythm in their music that you would never think of as a drummer, because drummers are so drummy.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, beats and fills, right?
Yeah.
Well, speaking of drums, what snare drum is on your kit right now?
Oh, an Oriolo.
Oh, is that one of those seamless?
It's it's like a recreation of a bell brass. It's just like
why is that up?
It's a 3 millimeter. It's like a bell brass shell with the die cast hoops.
Oh, it's a monster.
It was up because it sounds really good. I was doing the track for this artist. Actually, I got to do one more track today for him, and it's kind of rocking. There's some guitars going down, and those drums, like the bell brass, really, you can dig into them, and they just sound great.
Mm-hmm.
They don't choke. You can muffle them down. They sound good. You can open them up. And I think those shells that guy's making are pretty close to the old Tama ones. Mm-hmm. Although the old Tama ones have this like mystique. They're just bizarre. It's like this bizarre energy around them. I don't know. Every time I talk to John over at Angel City, he'll always school me on the differences of the bell brasses, because he has like some of the 80s ones, and then he has I think he has a 90s one, and then he has like a Duluth Foundry. You know that? No. It's it's the foundry that made the shell for the Dave Elich model DW one.
Okay. Yeah.
And so this foundry makes, I guess it's called bronze technically.
Mm.
And they sand cast it. That's the way they did it originally, and they'll do whatever thickness you want, but the magic one is the 3 millimeter thick.
Can you hear a difference between the different types?
Nope.
Yeah.
Not really. I mean, it's very subtle, and it's not enough of a difference to even make a difference, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you're recording, it's like there's so many other variables that would make a difference, like your room, your mic, how the engineers EQing it,
mm-hmm.
The instrumentation around the drums.
Yep.
I don't know. I mean, an example is like, I've heard Dave Grohl play on a bunch of different snares, and they all sound like Dave Grohl to me. And they're all, they're all different snare drums, and they all sound like Dave Grohl. So,
yeah.
I mean,
that's the same for you, obviously. I mean, your snare sound is, everyone talks about it, and I'm like, I don't think Matt's used the same snare twice. Like, how would you know what drum he's using if it's just your sound? Now, is that coming from? I've thought about this a bunch for myself. Like, do you have a sound in your head that you kind of get the drum to do, or do you let the drum do what it's going to do? Like, how do you approach playing a snare drum? Do you have a sound that you like? I'm going to make my hands produce this sound on this drum, or is it more the instrument tells you what it wants?
Well, there's a bunch of variables. Like, are you speaking of like a live gig, a recording session? Because live is like a whole different set of parameters. Like, you can do whatever the hell you want live.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can play on anything live. I mean, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah. We're talking studio for sure.
I mean, like in the studio. Okay, so there's like, what kind of music are we talking about? There's that classic sound that everybody goes for now, which is basically the yacht rock kind of drum sound, which is 70s dead thwack.
Yep.
And that could be that could really be any snare drum. I mean, I can get any of my snare drums to do that. Yep. You just got to tape the fuck out of them and detune them. Mm-hmm. And then the only difference would be is the amount of like the snare wires. Like, if there's like some snare wires have more high end, some are darker. So, you get that thing. So if you're doing that kind of music where you need like that classic, just fat 70s thing, there's that. But then there's stuff where you just want the snare to be open and just gnarly sounding, and but a lot of times it depends on, well, actually all the time it depends on the music, and it depends on the room that you're in, how it sounds in the room, how the engineer's miking it. Like if you come back and you listen, like, if you decide to put up like a Keplinger snare that's wide open, you come back and you listen to the track and you're like, oh man, I guess you're like cranking the close mics, because it's the whole time it's just going, but if, the guy has like more of a roomy thing, then the note goes away. It just kind of becomes part of the mush. So it depends on what kind of miking you're doing. I mean, right now, and actually for like the past 15 years, it seems like this real compressed, dead drum thing is kind of the way that most people do recordings. So, there's that thing to consider, and the thing, like recently when I'm out here recording by myself, I've been messing around with having 4 toms. And so, I'm hitting the snare and I'm like, where's this tom vibrating? I got to like check the bottom head. And because that's always the problem with that kind of recording, is the drums are so compressed that any tom that is making an overtone is going to be part of your snare sound. And like if you're just playing the groove and your toms are going while you're playing the groove, that's going to fuck up that dead 70s thing. So it's like, you got to go around and make sure all your toms are not, then you got to start tuning the snare up or down to see if you can get out of the frequency range and then tuning the toms up and down and putting tape on them and like just, it's like a whole thing. Cause it's like everything's vibrating against each other. Sometimes you got to get creative with muffling and stick shit on the bottom head of the floor tom. That's always like the culprit, the bottom floor tom head a lot of times. So if you're doing that kind of recording, the snare drum sound for me is usually not a lot of ring, but a nice crack with some snare in there, that's my default. And the snare I usually go for about 99% of the time is my Craviotto Diamond, the chrome over brass. The very first snare he ever made with AK.
Yep.
It's basically like a chrome over brass 20s Ludwig snare drum, 6.5 by 14. And that drum I love. It's just, I don't know if, I'm sure you have certain snares where they just do this thing. You don't even know what's going on. Like, even if I change the head, I crank it, get it back to that zone. And it's like, oh, thank you. You do that. And that's what you do. And I like you. And I'm going to use you a lot because you work. And then, then I have character snare. I call them character snares because they're just so weird. They're just like, I have this one snare that's like from the early 1900s that has the little tightener things around, those kind of snares.
Wow.
Like you've seen them before. They're like really old from the early 1900s where you have like instead of lugs, you have these little
single tension thing.
Yeah, and that drum, you hit it and it sounds like a sample. It has no high end, it's just like this weird mid-range, and you put a mic on it and it's like, it sounds like a sample. Like if you want to do like a 60s breakbeat thing with it, you could use that. I couldn't get my Craviotto to do that. It's full frequency. So a lot of snares have certain characteristics built into them that you can use for certain types of music or whatever effect you're going for. But I'm not a big fan of just having a bunch of like really nice snare drums around that all sound the same, because they all eventually start sounding the same because you have like a preference. Like everybody has a preference. Like now I was noticing I tuned my snares all kind of the same, and I was like, this kind of sounds like this snare, and this, like the bell brass kind of sounds like the Craviotto, and that sounds like I just bought one of these sugar drums, and I was like, man, that sounds like the Craviotto. I mean, as far as the tuning goes, like the characteristic is obviously different, and the sugar ones smell really good when you play them. They have like this aromatic.
Is that the cedar? Is that the cedar?
Yeah, it's like aromatherapy. Like you're hitting backbeats and you're like, can kill some moths with this shit.
So what would be the cue for you to put the Craviotto away and grab something different? If you could literally make the Craviotto be your only drum, like what would be the cue to like, let me put that bad boy away and get something else?
Well, if you're trying to do something, a lot of people love now, right now, it seems like people really love snares that are super low and dead. Like, I have like this 50s WFL 15 diameter by 6.5 inch.
Mm-hmm.
That thing, you can just detune it, tape it up, and it's like, it's just like a kick drum with snare wires on it or something. And you can't do that with the Craviotto. I mean, you can get it pretty low, but you can't do like that. It's almost like the, that Peter Gabriel song Intruder.
Oh yeah,
like that kind of snare sound. Where it's like the snare almost takes up like like 2 quarter notes or something. It's like, and a lot of that sound is coming from electronic music. So it's like you're basically just trying to copy like the sound of like a 909 snare drum,
right?
With the noise, with like more decay on it, because you're competing with that element in a lot of pop music, at least. So at least that's my take on it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would say I wouldn't use the Craviotto for that, or sometimes I like to put up. I still got my old Noble and Cooley piccolo snare, and that thing just does that thing.
Is that the one headlight drum? I got a listener question. Wanted to know
what. No, that drum I unfortunately sold. I got rid of it.
Okay.
Don
Is it
Bennett.
the same drum though? Same.
The one
model?
I have is a little deeper. The one I had on one headlight was the 3.75 deep.
Okay.
I have like a 5 deep now.
Okay.
But it's a maple. The one I have now is a maple. And I just love that sound. It's just, and that affects the groove too. So there's a lot of things where I'll think it needs to be super dead, but it can make the groove a little, sloppy sounding. It takes up too much space, so I'll go for like the higher pitched snare that's still kind of muffled down for most stuff I'm doing. Because, I'm doing stuff for songwriters most of the time. I'm not, if I was doing stuff in a band, I would do whatever the hell I want. But a lot of times songwriters just want a drum sound that's not too insane unless they specifically ask for it. I try to add some character as I'm recording, but I just want it to feel good and fit in with the music and the other instruments. So, I have maybe 3 or 4 snares I would go to on a session just to have the options, depending on what the producer or, whatever. I mean, so, I'm sure you've been in some rooms where, your favorite snare drum sounds like shit, and you're just like, well, what's going on? So I need a backup. I need something else to try, or something that has more of something else in it that would cover you in those situations.
What was your first snare drum?
That Tama 6.5 Rosewood Superstar.
The red finish? Yeah, I have one of those. It's so cool. So that was the same drum that Glenn Kochi said was his first drum, but his was an 8x14. So wow. I can only assume Neil Peart was the inspiration for you to get that drum, right?
Yeah, but we didn't know, or I didn't know at the time that he played the Slingerland artist model.
Oh, right.
Yeah, he didn't play the Tama snare drum. I just thought it was cool looking. I thought it was a cool looking drum. Sounded really good.
Yeah, I got one of the 40th anniversary reissues. It's a cool drum.
Yeah, I wish I had one. I don't though.
So was that your first drum as a kid, or the first drum you bought specifically for a snare drum sound?
First drum, yeah.
Nice. So what was your first purchase when you were like, I need to get another snare?
Well, let's see. I pretty much just had that drum until I joined Edie Brickell and the New Bohemians.
Okay.
And I started to make enough money where, I could pay my rent and eat and buy drumsticks, and then I could buy another snare drum. And so I bought a Noble and Cooley. that was my second snare drum. And I had that, it was that piccolo, was that one. Because I used that piccolo snare on that Edie Brickell record, that Pearl Jam live video was that Noble Bowie snare, one headlight. I just used that snare. I only had that snare. Like, I don't know. I mean, I always think back on that, like, man, it was so simple. I just had a snare drum and I just made it work. I just like tuned it down and it was like a little piccolo. I was like able to like play like grunge rock with it and like somehow play with, it's just crazy how you can. And so a lot of times I will try to do that to myself. I'll try to take out my snare drums out of my space and just leave like 3 or 4 and just go, okay, these are the 3. You're going to make them work. And it usually works. And, a lot of times I'll go to studios that producers have, and they just have like 1 or 2 snare drums there, and those work too. You just, most drums, you can make them sound pretty good and make them work for most music, unless they're just really shitty snare drums. But even then, there's like a beauty to a shitty snare drum.
Yeah. Right. So I'm gonna rapid fire through a few listener questions that I'd gathered up. Some of these you've already answered, but what is your most used snare drum?
That Craviotto one.
That's the 6.5x14 chrome over brass.
That one, and then shit. I need to go look at my snares. I can't remember. I should. No, yeah, it keeps changing. I mean, that would be the one I can think of for sure. I mean, for a while it was like the classic Ludwig stuff. Like a couple of years ago, I was using my Superphonic, and I just bought 2 Superphonics. I had like the 6.5 and the, was it 5? 5.5?
5.
Had those 2. And I got them to work for a bunch of records, and those always do the job for just about anything. I was surprised. Wood snares, I just realized I don't have many, so I'm trying to dive into that. That's why I got that Sugar percussion snare. I was like, well, I used to have a Brady snare that I loved, that of course I still as well. But you can't buy them anymore because
no, you can't.
Freaking expensive now.
Yep.
Man, I love that sound, that stage snare sound. But so got a Sugar percussion one. I love the solid shell wood snares. I mean, any of those Craviotto snares are incredible. Like those are my favorite pieces of all his drums that he made, were all his snare drums. They're just so versatile, and beautiful sounding. Like the cherry wood one, the 6.5x14. I love that one. There's a lot of them out there. There's too many snare drums out there.
I know. Yeah. I'm sure my wife could agree.
Yeah. There's a lot of snares.
A secondary part of that question, what are your most used hi-hat cymbals?
That changes all the time.
Okay.
I mean, I have like I'm with Paiste now, so I have like, I love the Masters dark hats. I have like 14s and 15s, but I also love like the 602s for more articulate stuff. And I have a bunch of old like vintage new beats and like old Istanbul Ks, 50s and 60s. I just picked up a set of hats from Revival Drum Shop. Those Revival cymbals they make.
Oh yeah, is that the Holy Grail ride cymbal? They make that.
Yeah, they have like a Cymbal and Gong is the company, but they make these really cool. They just made these new line of rides and crashes, and I asked them to do the hi-hats like that with that weird hammering, and those are real dark and weird. And I just have like a whole bag of these weird cymbals that, depending on the song. I mean, those Stuart Copeland hi-hats are really great. Those Paiste, they're like those little welding
things. Yeah.
Those are amazing. They're so cool. Like it's like you play them in a track and you're like, oh, that's great. I mean, it's just like the frequencies are so high up there, they almost sound electronic. You know what I mean? Like I love that. And it can sit in a track in a cool way. But it all depends. I mean, it's like, as a session musician, I get presented with different types of music. So depending on what they're going for, I got to be prepared.
Yep.
Professional musician.
So here's another question from the your discography. Do you remember the snare drum on Fiona Apple's Fast As You Can? And did you use splash cymbals for hi-hats on that track?
Remember the snare drum on that one?
Yeah, and the hi-hats.
Yeah, those were John Bryan's drums, the producer. They were the snare drum was like a Slingerland Radio Kings, like they made those little 10-inch snares. You ever seen those?
No, 10 inches?
Yeah, they made I don't know if they were like part of like the cocktail kit that they made, but John has like all these old like crazy weird drums that he'll just sessions. But it was one of those snares. It was like a 10-inch, maybe even a 12-inch, but it was a little snare drum, and the hi-hats were. I think they were like trying to think, because that kit or that song has 2 drum kits on it, or actually 3 drum kits. So
really 3 different setups.
Yeah, like on that record we were into doing that thing of like we had all these drum kits set up in the room, and it was when Fiona, she just gave us the songs. And we would just do we did drums for like 2 weeks on her tracks, and it was just drums. So we were like, okay, we're gonna have like the Ludwig kit. That's gonna be like the main kit, and then we had that weird kit with little 10-inch snare, and it was like a single-headed old Slingerland with a cap head and like these weird little hi-hats. They might have been splash cymbals. And then we had a kit set up in the control room that was like right behind the console. And then I had like my Taos drums there and a bunch of percussion. But we'd use the kits for different parts of the song. So you could have like the one kit for the verse and then another kit for the chorus. Mm-hmm. And then you would have another kit maybe for the bridge. It was kind of a big experiment.
Was that the first time you did that? Was this pre-Tori Amos?
No, this was 99. So this was like around the time.
Okay.
And Tori was like 97.
So kind of already in this mindset of just trying a bunch of
hybrid
stuff. Yeah,
like hybrid. That was kind of what was going on in music too. I mean, you had hip hop, and back then hip hop involved a lot of break beats and sampling of actual drums off of records, called or like the Beastie Boys stuff where they actually played, but they jacked the sound up so much that you're like, what is that? They ran the drum kit through a ARP 2600 synthesizer or something, or you were trying to emulate like Portishead, which is still like a mystery to me how they got those amazing drum sounds. But so you're trying to emulate all that stuff was going on. So you're trying to like emulate programming, but you're also informed by hip hop and but you want to perform at the same time. Like that was the thing with Fiona's records was we tried to get those sounds like they were loops or samples, but we would just play. I would play the drums instead of looping the drums. So it was a performance that went through, except for the punching in the different kits. But I would play through the whole sections with these particular sounds, whether they be from the actual acoustic drums themselves or by the way they mic'd them and processed them. So it was like, I remember the one thing John said on that one, on the record with Fast As You Can, he said, the whole idea is to play shitty drums mic'd with like super expensive mic. Like we had like, we tried to see if we could get like $100,000 worth of mics on like the shitty, super shitty, like, I don't know, like 60s Japanese drum kit with like the original heads on it, like all fitted. Had like those 251 mics on every tom, which I think those 251s cost like 20 grand each, Yeah, he's like, well, we're in a recording studio. It's like most people come to recording studios and use like 57s on the snare drum. It's like, that's the shit you use in rock clubs. You use like the fucking U47.
That's a good valid point. Use it.
So yeah, I think that Fast As You Can was that tiny weird snare, single-headed bass drum, and the hi-hats were definitely like these weird, they were probably splash cymbals or just weird hi-hats. Like there's all those hi-hats floating around from the 60s that were with those Japanese drum kits.
Mm-hmm.
You ever see those cymbals? Like if you look at the underside of the bell, it has like a stamp that says Japan on them.
I have one that says Super. Is that similar? I think they're nickel silver.
Yeah, they're just like, all these cymbals that we found look like they were dug up from somebody's backyard or something.
Yeah.
Like, they're just like, but they sound really cool in the context of a drum kit.
Yeah.
So
let's talk about transferring all this experiment. We're going to wrap it up here. We're getting to the end of the hour, but transferring all these experiments to the live presentation. Like, how do you create a kit? How do you build a Tori Amos kit? When I saw you with her, I don't know, that was 12 years ago, you had like bongos below your ride cymbal. I'm like, that was a cool choice, but how the hell did you get there? Like, to put bongos underneath your ride cymbal or something? There was some.
I had that little. Yeah, it was like it was like a it was just like a little 8-inch. What do you call this? Like single-headed toms, like. The idea was like, the concept of like when Bill Bruford rides on an octoban,
okay,
to have that be like a source of groove. Like, you could use that. But I was using that I had my band Critters bugging at the time, and my drum kit setup in that band was electronics and the weird bongo, and I had like a little side kick drum and just all this percussion and contact mics and all this shit. And so I just applied it to when I worked with Tori.
Okay.
And used it with her. And she was into it. So that's cool. Most people would be like, what the hell are you doing?
What is that tree thing? It's like a
little
Brazilian drum. Yeah. What is that thing?
Just a tambourin machine. It's like, it's,
is that real? I don't know. Made?
No, Contemporânea, the Brazilian percussion company.
They make
it. I guess I guess it's made for samba bands that don't have enough tambourin players. Maybe.
Okay.
Because they make that one that has 3 on each side, and then they make one that has like 5 on each side. And I just saw what's the percussionist's name? I saw him playing one. What's his name? He plays.
I know what you're talking about. I saw him with Atoms for Peace. With
no, it's not Morrow.
No, not
Morrow.
Him.
It was the guy. He plays a lot with Medeski, Martin and Wood, and he had a band called Ciro Batista.
Yes,
Batista. He had that, and I was like, "What is that thing?" And then I saw one at Pro Drum, and I was like, "Well, I need this thing in my life." It's like I just use it as like a clap sound. Like instead of doing like a clap sample, you just stick that in a room and just go, or just for like overdubs. And I had Chris Hewer at Angel City over there. He rigged up a DW cable hat to it, so I could play it with my foot. And I used that on a Tori tour. Is that what you were talking about?
Yeah,
did you see it?
I saw that tour. I was like, what the hell is that thing up there? It was like a Dr. Seuss instrument on stage.
Yeah. It's so ridiculous. And the cable is so long that I could stick it on like the other side of the stage and have it like other people. I think on that tour I got into like taking pictures of people's faces and then going into the office and like printing out a big thing of their head, and like taping it on the little tambourin machine so it looked like the little arms were. Yep. So that's what happened.
Oh, man.
But that thing's useful. I still use it all the time. I have it over here. It broke a few times. It's made out of aluminum, and I've had it welded back together. And it's cool. It's a cool sound. Acoustic weirdness.
Well, to wrap it up with one final question for anyone who's interested in maybe getting the studio rolling or getting into, making their first investment, what would be the core kit that you would say someone should get? Sizes and like the do-all kit, not brands or whatever, but if you had to pick one setup, what would it be?
Just like a 22, 13, 16.
Yeah.
And a snare drum. That covers just about anything.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, 20 could cover just about anything, but I think at 22, you could probably venture into punchier kick tones, depending on what brand. I mean, I've heard some 20s that sound like 22s. So, I mean, like Rogers, like those old Rogers 20-inch kick drums are massive sound. But I'd say like a 22, 13, 16 with a snare of some sort. It could be a 5 or 6.5. Probably 6.5 would be the most versatile.
Brass, aluminum.
Sure. I mean, you can't go wrong with any of the Ludwig stuff.
Yeah.
I think Ludwig snare drums are kind of like, you just get a Ludwig snare drum and it sounds like a snare drum. You don't have to do too much to it. I mean, even the new ones sound like any of the metal ones, like the Superphonics or the Black Beauties. Those are all great. And they're all like $500-600, right? They're not too crazy.
Yep.
Even those Acrolites, man, those new ones they make, those the 6.5 by 14s, those are great.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're making them I think in brass now as well.
Wow. Yeah, those are like good workhorse snare drums. I mean, obviously all the boutique, there's a million great boutique snares too. I mean, depends on how much money you got.
Right. Yeah.
Some of that shit's ridiculous. It's like, what? It's just a snare drum. I mean, it's a snare drum, but I mean, it's not just a snare drum, but it's like, come on. It's like,
yeah. But then you go into like acoustic guitar world and you're like, oh, you can spend a whole lot of money here.
Yeah, I shouldn't complain. We don't play like, a cello or something.
Yeah, right. Upright bass.
You have to take a second mortgage out on your house to get your instrument.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got it easy. Drummers have it very easy as far as financial commitments. Although it does add up when you start getting all the different elements, right? I mean,
well, yeah, for me moving, I had to get my own moving truck to get my drums from one house to the other. I'm like, why did I just sell all this crap? Like,
what's wrong with you?
What is wrong with me?
You don't need another snare drum. They all sound like snare drums.
As I order another snare drum. Yep. That's the way it is.
Yeah, I just tell my wife that it's like, well, I mean, she doesn't care anyways. She's like, obviously it's what you do, but it's like having like producers that have like a hard drive full of like drum samples for doing records. That's my excuse, is like, I have samples. They're like real life drum samples. They just take up space. I can't put them on. If I could put them on a hard drive, I would. But they're physical objects that need drum heads to be changed. It's like having pets as well, because you got to take care of it. Yeah. It's like, oh, this guy needs a new drum head. Maybe I'll try some different wires on this guy. Yeah, snares are fun. I like snare drums. And then the weird snares. There's like a lot of fun, like A&F made me those little bongo snares and I have like a 22-inch snare drum.
That's surreal. Yeah.
I like those for like adding, I mean, because a lot of them sound like white noise, like they're almost electronic. If you hit them, you can almost use them as like a crash cymbal. Like the 22, if you have the wires really loose, you just kind of hit it and it goes boom. Or you can just hit it with your hand almost, and it's just like this weird noise. Love that. But it does create a lot of snare buzz. So if you're playing a groove and you have a 22-inch snare over here, it's like you gotta like turn it off and like turn it on when you need it, if you can, without making noise.
Man, so does the gear really matter, or is it just to keep you inspired at this point?
Oh yeah, it's there's certain tools that are very important you got to have. I think it just makes recording easy. Otherwise, you're sitting there going, God, I wish I had this. I mean, especially if you know what they do. Like, there's certain drums that I always default to because I know they're going to do that thing I need. Mm-hmm. They have certain frequencies in them, or they don't have certain frequencies in them, and I can think, okay, this is going to work in this track, and thank God I have these particular sounds because it's going to make the track do that thing that I want it to do. I mean, I can get it to do it with other drums, but certain drums just give you that full on, like, yeah, this is really doing that thing I want it to do. Mm-hmm. Whether it's like, I have some calfskin kits that have all calfskin drum heads, and there's a thing those things do that you can't get with, plastic heads. Mm-hmm. And you can do things to those drums, like as you record them, you can with compression and the way they react to limiting and all that. It's just a whole different thing. It's just really unique sounding to me. It's like using gut strings on a guitar instead of steel strings. It's like that kind of difference. Mm-hmm. It's a whole, like, those kind of things are important to me. I like having them around. They're good tools. But then I love modern stuff. Like Yamaha just sent me this PHX kit, the Phoenix kit.
That's modern. Yeah, that's about as long as it gets.
And this kit is freaking me out. It's so great. And I just left the heads on it that it came with. Mm-hmm. I never used clear heads on my toms, but I was like, fuck it. I'm just going to leave them on there, just tune them up, make it work the way they envision the kit to sound. And it's so much fun to play. That's what I've been using all week on this record I'm doing. I've been using those, what's that company? Roots EQ, those mm-hmm. little, I've been using those on the toms to get rid of some of like the ringing overtones, but the kit sounds so good. Plus I'm just a fan of, like those, do you remember those Sonar signature drums?
Oh yeah.
They're like the shells are like, 12 plies, and Ronald Shannon Jackson used to play them, and right. Love that shit. And so I was like, yes, I'm going to have some crazy ass shell drums to like mess with. But they're really versatile. They're very warm. They actually have more body and low end than the maple kit that I have, because they sent me the hybrid maple, which is also great for like rock. I think those are really great rock drums. But the Phoenix drums are great for everything. They're just, they kind of sound like a more punchy version of my Camcos. I have like these 60s Camcos, and these are like a more realized, like more Technicolor version of them,
Do you play differently because of that?
I don't know. Maybe.
Play, right?
I play differently on modern drum kits because they're set up so that you can like play. But like, vintage drum kits are like, oh shit, the thing's falling over and the palm is like, it makes you play a certain way. But when you have like a modern drum kit set up, I feel like an Olympic athlete or something, with like good gear. Like,
no
I got some skis on. I can run really fast and jump really high. But with like, the vintage stuff, it's like, I don't want this tom. Like you got to, how it is. You got to set things up in weird ways, and you can't hit things too hard. Like on Caskin drums, there's a certain. It's like you have different techniques for different situations. But I love those Phoenix drums. I'm digging them. I keep trying to just use new shit. That's my goal. I'm trying as much as I can. I don't want to be one of these guys that's like, you got to have a Ludwig kit or an old Gretsch 3-ply. Otherwise, you're just not recording. It's just not a good recording. Although they do have a sound, but I mean, I don't know. Fuck, man.
Yeah.
That's why drummers are crazy.
I know.
Because you have so many options. There's a lot of options out there for, but they all sound really good to me. I mean, they're all just different flavors. So whatever you're into, obviously I think there's a difference between being in a band and being a session musician. So if you're in a band, you're going to play whatever the fuck you want. Mm-hmm. And hopefully your band members will deal with it. Mm-hmm. And then, but if you're a session musician, you're obviously being prepared for just about anything that could come your way. So It's a whole different thing. If I was in a band, I'd probably have like just two or three snare drums, and
like back in the day, you had a Noble and Cooley and a Tama for how many years?
Yeah. Look at Stuart Copeland. He just has his Tama kit, and he has that one snare drum. Like, he sounds fucking awesome. He doesn't need a wall of snare drums. He doesn't need like a vintage Ludwig kit, you know.
Oh man, well, thank you so much for spending the time. I could sit all day and talk shop with you, but I'll let you get to work since you actually have work to do. But so anyone listening, definitely check out. You're going to be putting out more solo music because this is an EP. Is there any more coming? It's called Foundry or The Foundry. That's Foundry, the latest EP. But what's next?
Well, you know, there's a band. I forgot to tell you, there's a band that I've been doing. A pandemic band with Stone Gossard from Pearl Jam.
Right, Painted Shield.
Painted Shield, and I'll send them modular synth drum things, and the singer is this guy Mason Jennings, who's fantastic. He's also like a solo artist in his own right, but so I'll send him these things, and he'll send them back to me with like vocals, completed songs, and then we'll send him to Stone, and he'll try putting guitar on it. And so we have one record out already, and then the next one's being mixed right now. We have
great.
That one's really fun because a lot of it I got to write, and it all came from these weird little experiments I've been doing here, where I'll just lay down the modular synth thing and then go bonkers on the drum kit, and then send it to Mason, and thinking there's no way he's going to come up with, like, how is he going to sing over this? I couldn't sing this. What's going on? And then he sent it back to me, and I'm like, wow, he sang over it. Wow. So there's that, and then there's something else I'm doing. There's a lot of things going on. I can't remember. A lot of things moving right now. I mean, there's some stuff I can't talk about because I would get in trouble. So
yeah. Well, I think everyone should check out I was listening to the Painted Shield record. I kept thinking it was Painted Windows. I was like, that would be what I would make, a Painted Windows record.
Power Windows. Power Windows.
Painted Shield, and then check out all of Matt's solo stuff. I go back to it all the time. I didn't tell you this the other day when you called to confirm. I was literally listening to your record when you called. I didn't want to be weird. Yeah, I didn't want to be weird, like, whoa, dude. But I was literally checking out your new record when my phone rang.
Cool,
it's pretty odd. But it's beautiful, beautiful stuff. I always go back to all your stuff. It's so inspiring. Even back to your self-titled first record, it's still, I think, leaps and bounds above what most drummers or anyone is making these days. So I love it. Thank you so much for sitting down, and hopefully we can check back in maybe next season. For now, hopefully I'll see you out on the road next year. Hopefully. Fingers crossed.
There's talk. There's the new variant coming out, and people are starting to cancel gigs. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it gets kicked to the curb soon. I mean, we'll see. I mean, maybe if this virus doesn't go away, everybody will have to have their own little personal Branson, Missouri setup, where you just set up in like a room, just like, string your gigs to people or something. I don't know. The weirdest 2 years I've ever been through in my life. That I think anybody's ever been through. I don't think anybody's ever been through a pandemic that I know. So.
No one's alive, right? 100 years ago.
Yeah, it's crazy times.
For real.
But the upside is that after the last pandemic, there was the Roaring 20s. So once this shit gets sorted out, people be like,
party on.
Playing it. You're like, they're not going to care what snare drum you're playing as long as you're rocking. Be like, recording? No way. I want to get out and play in front of people. Nobody's going to want to sit around inside their studio by themselves anymore, are they? After the pandemic gets dealt with?
It'll be the crash of the home studio market is what it'll be. No one's making records anymore.
People just be playing live. It's like, oh, you made a record? And I want to go see a gig. You can't play live, can you?
Right. Let's get back to that. That'd be great.
I can't wait. I can't wait to play live in front of people. I miss that.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Matt. That's it for this week. So what we're going to do to end this show is I have the track Pan Scan off of his latest EP called Foundry. We're going to drop in an excerpt of that so you can kind of hear the experiments he was talking about with mixing modular synths with acoustic drums and then overdubbing. It's a great record. Go check it out. Check out his entire discography. And we'll see you next week. Have a good one. Thanks for listening. Please like and share and subscribe and send us a review or drop a review on iTunes. All that helps. The show keeps on growing, and let's keep it going. Thank you so much. See you next week.